Thanks for attending my talk. My talk is entitled Global Pop, Converging and Diverging Patterns in the Evolution of Popular Music Around the Globe. And in this talk, I'll talk about the project I started last year as part of my PhD research. First of all, I would like to introduce my wonderful advisors and collaborators who have greatly helped me to make this project possible. I'm a first-year PhD candidate of the International Max Planck Research School at the Human Cognitive and Brain Sciences Institute, and I'm currently based in Marc's lab here in Leipzig, and also at Nori's lab in MPI for Empirical Aesthetics, which is in Frankfurt. First, let's try to imagine how much music is really out there in this world. It's estimated that around 60,000 songs are newly released just on Spotify every single day. And the kind of music you might be familiar and have heard it playing at the clubs or restaurants is likely bounded by the region where you live and your cultural background. And whether you like it or not, you would have heard about Elvis Presley and maybe Kraftwerk, but you may have never come across singers like Jo Young-pil in your life, who was one of the most iconic singers in Korea back in the 80s. And the kind of music you like and have personal attachments to is likely dependent on your age because the popular trends in music constantly change over time. At the back of my mind, I had this prolonged question of what kind of music do people enjoy listening to around the world? And how are they different to the music I'm used to? And how do these varied exposures people would have had in different places shape the way we perceive and experience music differently? Answering this kind of questions became now possible with large music data being digitized and available, and recent advancements in technologies like music information retrieval allows to quantify music by their acoustical characteristics. Marc and colleagues were one of the first to take the data-driven approach to empirically study the musical trends by using songs that entered the US Billboard charts since the 1960s. They quantified the tonal and timbral acoustic features and found some interesting trends. For example, they could observe that the use of dominant seventh chord was more common in the 60s and 70s, when popular genres at the time primarily being rooted in blues music. Whereas since the 90s, the prevalence of songs with no chords dramatically increased, which is related to birth of hip-hop in that era. And when it comes to timbral features, we can see, for example, that guitar, loud and energetic sound cluster forms a W shape, dominating the early 80s when hard rock and long guitar solos were a thing. 3 years later, this time Interiano and colleagues compared commercially successful songs that managed to enter the UK official charts, the Black Dots and Lines, and other songs that did not make the charts but were released in the same year. This time using high-level descriptors available through music information retrieval algorithms, they compared how successful songs are acoustically distinguishable from the non-successful ones. For example, you can see that both chart and non-chart songs have become more danceable over the years, but chart songs in general are on average more dancey. And chart songs also tend to be less sad than non-chart songs. More recently, Hove and colleagues also studied the US Billboard charts and observed that particularly the bass frequency regions of the songs have increased in loudness, suggesting that songs have become more bass-heavy over the years. Analyzing 1 million Spotify users' music streaming data, Park and researchers from Spotify found some cross-cultural differences. For example, they observed that Asian listeners generally prefer more calming music compared to the Latin American listeners who prefer more intense music. The discussed studies have provided valuable insights. However, most of these works are limited by relying on convenient datasets, such as the Million Songs dataset and the Billboard charts. What these datasets have in common is that the songs are almost entirely performed by Western artists with English lyrics. This is unfortunate because we concentrate only on a very small portion of the world. And our project aims to expand beyond the Western countries and look at cross-cultural differences by incorporating many countries across the 5 continents. Now with 55 countries, historical music data around the globe, we can not only test if some of the trends observed with the Western countries are also relevant in other countries, but we can also gain the opportunity to study the diversity of music around the world and the cross-cultural differences there may be. To tackle these questions, we take a data-driven approach and compile a large corpus which we named Global Pop. We're quite confident that this is the most comprehensive longitudinal collection of popular music records around the world. We then use various music information retrieval algorithms to quantify the musical features, and this includes low-level acoustic information such as loudness, as well as high-level features such as the mood of a given song. And now, given this historical data, we can study the dynamic trends and track the trajectories of popular music history dating back as early as the 1950s, and look at how these trends show a similar or dissimilar pattern in different corners of the world. Furthermore, we plan to go beyond retrieving information at the holistic song level, but also dissect each song by their fundamental music features such as melody, rhythm, and harmonic progressions in order to dive deeper into looking at statistical patterns related to melodic contour and rhythmic intervals and so on. Finally, we would also like to run large-scale cross-cultural experiments for validation purposes and to test hypotheses based on what we observe with the given data. In collecting the chart records around the world, a large chunk came from web scraping. We probably have scraped around 50 websites that have reliable documentations of the national chart records at the weekly chart level. We also have some electronic and scanned copies of books that were transcribed, as well as archival copies of magazines that have never been digitized. We basically had to manually type these scanned copies by using crowdsourced workers on Amazon Mechanical Turk, where we had tens of qualified workers and quality control reviewers who helped transcribing around 5,000 weekly chart entries. Now then, combining all of this, we spent a lot of time and effort into formatting the data to be consistent across various sources and taking care of issues like translation and duplicate artist names with minor spelling differences and so on. Ultimately, we have a very nicely formatted data that is searchable and reliable to work with. The final dataset consists of more than 4 million weekly chart entries, 180,000 unique songs, and the songs dating back as early as 1956. With all these data in hand, our first step was to tag any available metadata out there for each of the tracks. We used Spotify's API to search every song in our global pop database, where we retrieved up to 50 search results per song and performed fuzzy match with Levenshtein distance to select the best matching search candidate. And after searching these songs, we could obtain the MIR features computed by the Spotify's algorithms, such as the loudness of the song, tempo, energy, and other high-level features like the algorithmic estimates of the danceability and emotional valence of the song. We also plan to incorporate other MIR libraries by feeding the raw audio directly to gain more granular acoustic information. This allows for us to validate what we retrieve from Spotify, as well as complement the database by adding other music features that are not supported by Spotify. We'll also retrieve lyrics using the Music's Match API, which has shown to have great coverage in general, and particularly for songs that are not sung in English. Now, I would like to show you some of our preliminary results on subsample of 20 countries. And as an example, let's begin by looking at how loudness of songs have changed over the years. We see here that loudness began increasing dramatically since the 90s across the globe, often described as the loudness war, and then it seems to have leveled off in the 2000s. However, we see that there is an outlier where for Japan the loudness war seems to have never ended and is an ongoing trend. Let's take another example, and this time let's see how the emotional valence have changed over the years. Here, the higher the value means happier the music. And we see a lot more fluctuations going on over the years, and countries show more distinct patterns. But in general, we see that the valence in pop songs have declined over the last few decades in most countries, while for Latin American countries, the trend seemed to be the opposite. And when we look at tempo, we can see that the average BPM of songs have consistently stayed flat around 120 BPM throughout the 7 decades. However, again, Japan is an outlier here and have consistently preferred around 5 BPM faster tempo music compared to the rest of the world. The duration of songs form an inverted U shape, where the maximum duration peaked during the 80s, and the songs have become shorter and shorter ever since. And in general, since the 80s, the songs have become more dancey, potentially related to the birth of disco and techno at the time. There is also another steep incline in the last decades as EDM have become popular. When we look at time signature, we see that there has been a mix of 3/4 and 4/4 up until the 80s, whereas nowadays it's almost a flat line with all of the songs being 4/4. So all of this is cool to see, but one may question, what does it even mean by something like danceability? How well do these algorithm estimates reflect human perception, and do they generalize across countries? I mean, the kind of music Americans find danceable, are they same as how a Korean person might think? And since these mood detection algorithms are generally trained on English songs with human ratings gathered from Western listeners, could the algorithm already be culturally biased? Our first step in this big project was to run a cross-cultural experiment to see how much of the mood detection algorithms actually align with human perception and see whether the algorithmic estimates can be generalized across cultures. And to do this, we compiled a stimuli set of Brazilian, Korean, and US songs that were popular in the last decade and got participants from the three countries to make ratings on their familiarity of the music they heard, their preference, and perceived mood of the song. We then compared these human ratings with the automatic mood detection algorithms. We found that the human ratings from each of the countries aligned equally well with the algorithmic estimates obtained from Spotify. This was surprising because we expected that the ratings made by the Americans would correlate better, given the algorithms are mostly trained on English songs with Western raters. But this was found not to be the case, at least when it comes to pop music. We then compared how much people from the three countries agree with each other compared to how humans in general agree with the algorithms. Although the algorithms aligned quite well with human judgments with correlations around 0.5, there was a substantial gap when compared to the agreements among humans. And this highlights that there is still room for improvement for these algorithms to perform better to estimate human perception of mood in music. And this study is now accepted as proceedings for Izmir. That's going to happen in November this year. Okay, so these were some of our preliminary results. And these were only a few things that we looked at the beginning on a descriptive level. But we obviously plan to do more in-depth analysis to look at the data in various angles. And namely, we plan to look at music features separately. And we also plan to analyze the lyrics. And we have some exciting ideas for cross-cultural behavior experiments. So stay tuned and get in touch if you want to know more or share any ideas. And thank you. Thank you for listening.